You have $100 million and nobody knows. Not your barber who's cut your hair every 3 weeks for the last 9 years and still asks how the job is going. Not your sister who thinks you're doing all right because you helped her with a car payment once and never mentioned it again. Not the woman at the gas station who waves every morning because you're always there at 6:40 in the same grey jacket, buying the same coffee. You're not hiding. You're just not advertising. And somewhere between those two things is a life almost nobody on earth gets to understand until they're standing inside it. The number didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived in a spreadsheet on a Tuesday while you were waiting for a quote on a transmission repair. No champagne, no phone call. Just a column of numbers that quietly crossed a line you'd stopped expecting to cross. This is the story of how that happened. And why almost none of it looked the way you thought it would. You still set an alarm. That's the part people never believe. Not because you have somewhere to be, you don't, not really, but because stillness scares you more than work does. So at 6:15, the alarm goes off and you make coffee in the same chipped mug you've had since your first apartment. And you check 4 spreadsheets before you've finished your first cup. The spreadsheets don't ask anything of you. That's the strange part. They just sit there, updating themselves, doing the thing you built them to do, whether you watch them or not. You watch anyway. Old habits don't know the bank balance changed. People imagine wealth like this comes with a costume change. Better suits, a different car, a different way of walking into a room. Mostly it doesn't. You still drive the truck with 161,000 miles on it because it runs and because replacing it feels like solving a problem that doesn't exist. The money didn't change your taste. It just removed the tax on every decision you used to make out of fear. What it did change was quieter than that. It's the way you sleep now. Not better exactly, but differently. The 3 a.m. thought isn't, how do I cover this anymore? It's, is this still working the way I think it's working? Different anxiety, same hour. You learned early that money talks in 2 completely different languages depending on how much of it there is. Below a certain number, it's about survival. Rent, groceries, the gap between paychecks that never quite closes. Above a certain number, it stops being about survival and starts being about systems. You don't think about a single dollar anymore. You think about flows, money moving in, money moving out, the gap between the two getting wider every quarter without you doing anything new. That shift from dollars to systems is the actual story, not the number. The number is just where the story happens to be standing when someone asks, so how does a person end up standing there? It starts almost always somewhere boring. Nobody believes you when you tell them the first asset costs $6,200. Not $6.2 million, $6,200. Most of it borrowed against a credit card you were embarrassed to admit you had maxed out twice already. It bought 4 coin-operated air machines, the kind gas stations install for tyre pressure, sitting in the back lot of a strip mall that's since been torn down. You didn't choose air machines because you loved them. You chose them because nobody else wanted to. The margins were thin enough that bigger operators didn't bother, and the maintenance was annoying enough that lazy operators let their machines break and stay broken for months. That gap between technically profitable and actually worth managing turned out to be where almost all of your money would eventually live. The math was unglamorous and completely honest. Each machine cleared maybe $40 a month after the gas station's cut. 4 machines was $160 a month, less than a part-time job, for far less effort, about 90 minutes a month of actual labour, mostly driving between locations and collecting quarters that smelled like a vending machine and felt like nothing at all. But $160 a month, every month, whether you showed up or not, did something to your brain that no paycheck ever had. A paycheck stops the second you stop working. This didn't. The machine sat in that parking lot at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday doing exactly what it was built to do, with or without your permission, with or without your attention. You started watching other boring things differently after that. The car wash on the corner that always had a line on Saturdays. The self-storage facility off the highway with the sun-bleached sign that hadn't been updated since the 90s. The laundromat 2 blocks from your old apartment, the one with the flickering fluorescent light nobody had bothered to fix in years. You weren't looking at them as a customer anymore. You were looking at them as a system that either worked or didn't, and trying to understand which. The laundromat came first, 18 months later, for $94,000. Most of it alone, co-signed against terms that felt insane at the time and look almost laughably conservative in hindsight. It was in a part of town real estate agents describe as transitional, which is a polite way of saying nobody else wanted it either. 11 washers, 14 dryers, a previous owner who'd run it out of a flip phone and a shoebox of receipts, and underneath the mess, a number that worked, roughly $2,300 a month in clean profit in a business that, structurally, almost never goes away. People always need clean clothes. That need doesn't soften in a recession. It doesn't care what the market did this quarter. It just keeps repeating load after load, week after week, in a way that turned out to be worth more to you than any growth story you'd read about in a magazine. The air machines and the laundromat together cleared about $2,460 a month. Not enough to quit anything, enough to notice that boring, repeatable, slightly embarrassing businesses behaved completely differently than you'd been told they would. That noticing is where everything else started. Need you. There's a specific moment that changes how a person thinks about money, and it rarely looks like the moment they expected. Yours happened on a Thursday you'd taken off specifically to do nothing. No calls, no spreadsheets, nothing. By habit around noon you checked the accounts anyway. The laundromat had cleared $74 that morning before you'd even gotten out of bed. The air machines had taken in $11 combined. Nothing you did had caused either number. You hadn't touched a washer, hadn't filled a tire, hadn't been anywhere near either location in 4 days. The money didn't need you. It needed the machine, the actual mechanism, the location, the lease, the equipment, the small daily decisions you'd made months earlier that were still quietly compounding without requiring a single new decision from you. That's the part almost nobody explains correctly when they talk about passive income. It isn't passive in the sense of effortless. It's passive in the sense that the effort happened earlier, was finite, and is now done. You built something once. It keeps paying you for that one act of building on a loop until you decide to sell it or it stops working. Once you understood that, the question stopped being, how do I make more money? And became something closer to, how many of these loops can I build? And how fast can I build them without breaking what already works? You started reading P&Ls the way other people read novels, at night slightly obsessively, looking for the same pattern every time. A business with real, unglamorous demand, run by someone tired, undercharging, undermanaging, and sitting on more cash flow than they realized because they'd stopped looking closely enough to see it. You found the next one. 9 months later, a vending route, 43 machines scattered across 3 counties, sold by a man retiring after 22 years because his knees couldn't take the route anymore. He was asking $310,000 for something generating roughly $9,400 a month in profit. You financed most of it through a regional bank that didn't care about your resume, only your numbers, and your numbers, by then, had started to speak for themselves. That single deal nearly tripled your monthly cash flow overnight, not because you'd gotten smarter, because you'd gotten faster at recognizing the same pattern you'd already proven once, and faster at acting on it before someone else did. By the end of that year, the air machines, the laundromat, and the vending route together were clearing just under $14,000 a month. You still hadn't told anyone. You still drove the same truck. The only thing that had changed visibly was the size of the spreadsheet and the speed at which you'd started saying yes. Empire growth, it turns out, isn't a straight line. It's a series of slightly bigger bets made with slightly more confidence, repeated until the bets stop feeling like bets at all. Year 3, you bought a second laundromat. Bigger, better located, $340,000, financed mostly against the cash flow of the first one, which the bank now trusted because it had a 3-year track record instead of a stranger's word. Year 4, a small chain of self-storage units in 2 towns nobody had heard of, picked up for $1.1 million from a family that had inherited it and didn't want the headache of running it from 4 states away. Each deal got larger. None of them got more glamorous. You were never the person other investors wanted to talk about at dinner parties. Nobody brags about owning laundromats and storage units the way they brag about a tech startup or a piece of beachfront property. But the people who understood cash flow instead of headlines started finding you instead, quietly, the way water finds the lowest point in a room. By year 5, the portfolio looked like this on paper. 2 laundromats, 1 vending route, 1 self-storage cluster, and almost by accident, because a friend of a friend needed a partner, 6 small car washes acquired in a single deal at a price that, looking back, was close to theft. Combined monthly cash flow had crossed $61,000. You were 31 years old and had never once appeared in a business magazine, never given an interview, never posted a photo of a private jet you didn't own. What you had instead was something most people chasing the appearance of wealth never get: optionality. The freedom to say no to a bad deal without panic. The freedom to walk away from a partnership that felt wrong because losing it wouldn't sink you. The freedom to spend 11 months doing almost nothing while you figured out what you actually wanted the next 5 years to look like. A freedom that, on the surface, looked indistinguishable from someone with no ambition at all. Year 6 is when the laundromat chain really opened up. A regional operator with 9 locations across 2 states wanted out entirely. Divorce, health problems, a business he no longer had the energy to run. Asking price, $4.2 million against $94,000 a month in verified cash flow. You'd never moved that much money in your life. You also recognized immediately that the math worked exactly the same way the $94,000 laundromat had worked 6 years earlier, just with 3 more zeros attached. The size of the number had changed. The pattern underneath it hadn't moved an inch. Nobody throws a party for crossing $10 million. There's no ceremony for it, no plaque, no call from anyone congratulating you. You find out the way you find out everything else, by glancing at a number on a screen that used to feel impossible and now just feels like Tuesday. The strange part about crossing thresholds like that is how little it changes about the actual texture of a day. You still answer the phone when a tenant calls about a broken dryer. You still drive out personally, sometimes, when a manager is overwhelmed because showing up matters more to the long-term health of a business than almost anything you could read in a finance book. The number on the screen got bigger. The Tuesday stayed exactly the same size. $25 million crossed somewhere in year 8, mostly from refinancing the laundromat chain at better terms and rolling the freed-up capital into 2 more self-storage clusters, acquired almost simultaneously from operators who, again, were simply tired. Tired of the phone calls, tired of the maintenance, tired of running businesses that worked fine but no longer interested them. That word, tired, shows up in almost every deal you've ever made. Wealth, you've come to believe, isn't created mostly through brilliance. It's created by being one of the rare people willing to do the unglamorous, slightly tedious work that a tired previous owner no longer wanted to do, at a price that reflects their exhaustion rather than the asset's true value. $50 million crossed in year 10. By then, the portfolio had grown into something almost unrecognizable from the 4 air machines that started it. 11 laundromats, 4 vending routes, 3 storage clusters across 2 states, the original 6 car washes grown to 17, plus a small stake in a regional commercial laundry service that did all the linen work for hotels nobody had ever heard of in towns. Most people couldn't find on a map. None of it would ever make a magazine cover. All of it, combined, was throwing off just under $480,000 a month in net cash flow. Money that arrived whether you checked the spreadsheet or not, whether you were having the best week of your life or the worst. $100 million arrived 18 months after that, almost anticlimactically, through a combination of asset appreciation, a refinancing that freed an enormous amount of trapped equity, and one more large acquisition, a regional vending and laundry conglomerate. 26 locations in total, bought from a private equity group that had overpaid years earlier and finally needed an exit. You found out on a Tuesday the way you find out everything. A boring email, a subject line with no exclamation point. A spreadsheet that for 1 column, 1 row, 1 moment crossed a line that used to feel like science fiction and now just looked like a number that needed to be reinvested correctly before the quarter ended. Wealth people assume that crossing a number like that changes how a person moves through the world. Mostly, it just changes what a person worries about. You don't worry about rent anymore. You haven't worried about rent in over a decade. What you worry about now is whether a regional manager is cutting corners on maintenance in a way that won't show up for 2 years, whether a new acquisitions lease has a clause that'll cause problems in year 4, whether you're spreading the portfolio too thin across too many asset types, or not thin enough, or whether thin enough is even a real measurement or something you invented to feel in control. The anxiety didn't disappear, it just got more sophisticated, the way everything else about this life got more sophisticated. Quietly, gradually, without anyone announcing it. You still go to the same diner most Saturdays. The same guy still makes your coffee, still doesn't know what your bank balance looks like, still asks how the job is going. You still say it's going fine because in the most literal technical sense, that's true. The job is 41 separate businesses run by people who mostly never see your face, generating cash flow that keeps compounding whether you check the spreadsheet or not. You've thought more than once about what it would mean to say the real number out loud, to watch the diner guy's face change, to watch your sister recalculate instantly every version of you she's ever known. Mostly, you've decided against it. Not because you're ashamed and not because you're hiding, but because the version of your life that exists right now, the quiet one, the unremarkable one, the one where nobody adjusts how they treat you based on a number is worth more than the version where everyone does. That's the part almost nobody understands about real wealth until they've lived inside it for a while. The goal was never the number. The number was just the proof that the system worked, the same way $190 from 4 air machines once proved on a much smaller scale that the exact same architecture would hold. You still set an alarm. You still drink coffee from a chipped mug. You still drive a truck with too many miles on it because replacing it would solve a problem you don't have. The only thing that's actually different, the only thing that was ever actually different, is that somewhere behind the ordinary version of you that everyone sees, there's a system built slowly, boringly, one unglamorous asset at a time that no longer needs you in order to keep working, and most days that's the entire story, not the number. The system underneath it, quietly running whether anyone's watching or not.